This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Weather My Trains. Hey, are you like me and the thought of doing a DIY weathering job on an expensive engine leaves you in fear? It's time to call in Rob Arsenault at Weather My Trains. Do what thousands of satisfied customers have done and let Rob help you notch up the realism on your layout with beautifully detailed weathering on your locomotives and rolling stock. To see what Rob can do for you, check out his website at weathermytrains.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Joining us tonight from Des Moines, Iowa, producer, professor, television practitioner, video editor, modeler, and member of the Iowa Interstate Mafia, James McNab. James, welcome to the show.
Ray, thank you so very much for having me. Pleasure to be on with you and your audience.
With that kind of resume, I better be on my A game tonight, but glad I could do. I think maybe what would be the more important title there? Maybe the Iowa Interstate Mafia member. I think is that highest ranked?
Well, I could talk about the Iowa Interstate Mafia, but then, bad things would happen. We'd end up with horses' heads and beds. The less we talk about that, the better. I do not need Vinny and Guido and all these other guys knocking on my door and asking for a little tribute, for tonight. So hopefully the bosses will work with us together so we can have a good meeting of the families here.
Well, one of the members of the family turned you in as a member, and that'd be Matt Fricks. He mentioned some great things about you. So if you're looking for the snitch within the Iowa Interstate Mafia, you're going to have to go to Matt and teach him a little bit of a lesson.
Well, and considering Matt's an associate member, we have the core that are I like there's some division. I'm just being silly here. We have grown that little social club of ours that we affectionately refer to it. Obviously, we all have an interest in the Iowa Interstate. That's what connects us together. But we're starting to call ourselves the former Iowa Interstate modelers, because more and more of us are thinking, well, maybe I could do this. And it's like, you're going to have to turn in your ID card if you just start modeling that one. We're not going to let you identify with us. But then there's always the classic line, I would never want to be part of a club that would have me as a member. So it's a good balance to have friends like that in low places. So my thanks to Matt for connecting the two of us together.
Oh, that's great. And then you reached out very humbly and I started researching you and boy, there's just a whole lot for us to talk about on this podcast. Your Iowa Interstate Hills line that you have, and then you've got a past layout I got some questions about, and we'll get to all of that. But let's learn a little bit about James and how you got into the hobby. Tell us about it.
Well, I think like everybody, the path started the same. I had the Lionel train set. I had, the kid on the floor having the trains go around in circles. I distinctly remember that. And I've always had an interest in trains. I didn't grow up next to a railroad. I didn't have family members that were employed by the railroad. There wasn't like I lived, took a daily train or commuter or subway or something like that. They were these mythical things that I occasionally got to see. And when you see them, they're loud and they're smelly and they're dirty. And you're just like, that is the coolest thing ever. Why can't we have more of this? Right. And so that I think that was the fact that it was just this big hulking beast, that I rarely got to see. But when I got to see, there was no doubt this thing is coming. This thing is making noise. And then I think throughout my adolescence, basically, model railroading specifically kind of ebbed and, kind of rose and fell, so to speak. So there were times that I would really get into it and times I'd kind of back away from it. But I have to credit that my first real exposure to modeling, at least scale modeling, was probably when I was in early middle school, 6th, 7th grade. There was a gentleman in my church that had the HO Railroad That Grows. And I don't know if you remember that book that Kalmbach came out with, 30, 40 years ago. But the idea behind it was that it was a 4x8, plywood sheet layout. And what you did was that you built it in stages. So you started with basically an oval, and then you would go back and you would add a spur, and you would add a siding, and you would add a mine, and a tunnel, and kind of all these things. And he had built I think there were 8 or 9 steps of this HO railroad that grows. And we were, we found out, it's like, I like trains. You have a train. Can I come? And so I started in this habit of after church going over to this gentleman's house and kind of working and playing and I guess operating, for lack of a better term, on his layout. One of my very first exposures to model railroading was this full command control sound equipped layout. And this was, late 80s, early 90s. And my eyes were blown that this was even possible, because my experience up to that point had been, rheostat control and the turning the knob. And so I credit that experience with kind of, saying, well, this is what is needed for a layout. This is what the kind of the base level is. And so so shortly after I kind of started this association with him, I need to have my own layout. Well, I couldn't possibly afford a Keller onboard system, nor did I have the skill set to build anything even remotely close to what he was building. He was building master creations kits and doing just really cool stuff, admittedly on this 4x8 layout. And so I'm coming home going, well, let me stop by the local hobby store. Well, they don't have enough of this track, but they've got this brass track, and so I can buy some brass track and nickel silver track, and I'll be able to. And I did not know what I was doing, right. And so it was learning by being thrown into the deep end of the pool. And that's just an excellent way to kind of start any learning experience, in my opinion. But then as time passed, you kind of ebb and flow, you kind of rise and fall. And so got a little older, kind of pulled back from it, kind of maybe went back, kind of would keep reading, kind of step away from it, keep reading, step away from it. And, by my junior year in high school, which would have been 94, 95, somewhere in that neck of the woods, kind of got a little bit more back into it, at least with a Model Railroader. I had never had a subscription to Model Railroader magazine prior to that. I would occasionally pick up a copy from a hobby store, or from, I think even our grocery stores occasionally would carry it, but never had any kind of, consistent, I'm going to read it every month. I'm going to read it every, at times it's on the newsstand. It was just something every once in a blue moon. But starting in about May of 95 was really the first, issue that I picked up a Model Railroader, and then said, okay, I'm going to get June, and then I'm going to get July. And then, I should probably get a subscription because I'm paying the newsstand price and I can save money on this. And so since that point, that's kind of been the launch of my modeling career. For lack of a better term, went off to college and obviously had other interests and other things, but was able to kind of, I'm going to go pick this magazine up and just kind of keep it on a bookshelf, in my dorm room or in my apartment and everything. And then just kind of got through college, didn't build anything, but was just reading a lot of that time. And then, you get out of college and you're trying to start a career, you're trying to start a life, you've got no money, you've got I really had no money being a broadcast major. And it just kind of took time. And so it wasn't until about another 5-6 years that I really was able to say I'm now in a position to have something resembling a railroad, something resembling a layout that you kind of say, okay, that is a viable model railroad. But
as you're going through these college years, I just want to did you kind of have a vision? I mean, you're reading Model Railroader, you're kind of keeping your finger on it a little bit. Did you have like a vision of like what you dreamed of building? What was that vision?
the vision was I was going to do the everything and anything railroad, and I you know the inaugural edition of Model Railroad Planning came out in 1995, and I remember getting that, still have the copy to this day, and the railroad that stuck in my mind from that one was Bill Darnaby's Mommy Route, because that was that was my first exposure. I know he had been in previous articles in my railroad before that, but that there. And here was this double-decker, absolutely massive, railroad. It's like, well, I need one of those. I'm going to have one of those. And I just got to do 14,000 other things, but I'm going to have one of those. And then it was, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do that, and I'm going to, do this. And it was all basically looking at what others had done and say, this is what I'm going to do. From that standpoint, probably the greatest influence then, and I'd argue now, is David Barrow and his Cat Mountain in Santa Fe. That I have, David Barrow is my benchmark for what I want to accomplish with my railroads and with my layouts. Everything that he has written, everything that has been produced about the Cat Mountain in all of its forms, I have tried to completely absorb and try to understand and try to say, okay, what is he doing and how can I basically step up to his level. And so that but again, at the time that I saw it, he was still kind of he had just gone into the domino design, but was still doing, the fully scenic and the mainline running. He hadn't gotten into more of this minimalist design, which I think is amazing. And so I was like, I need one of those. I need a 400-foot mainline. I need, clean staging and all that other fun stuff. And I had eyes bigger than my stomach. And so it at that point, it really was, well, someday I'm going to build that. But right now there. And it really was the mature moment for me in railroading, or at least in modeling, was realizing that I didn't need the basement, behemoth. I didn't need the 400-foot to be able to satisfy what I enjoy about railroading. It just took me better part of a decade and change to figure out, okay, this is what I like, and this is what I need, and this is all that I need to accomplish what I like. Yeah.
I think we all start there, though, that whole idea that we got to build this massive empire, or that we want to have a massive empire. And, for some, that's exactly where they land, and that's exactly what they needed. But it's funny, and we'll kind of fast forwarding a little bit, but it seems now like the evolution of model railroading is going towards, some smaller layouts and showing that you can enter the hobby in a lot smaller way. But, going back, it's just funny that we all think that, we're going to have these massive empires, and, never mind the budget for it, never mind the real estate for it, never mind any of that. It just seems like that's a popular place to put our imaginations.
Well, that's how the hobby press makes their dollars. They want to put the things that make people go, wow, I want that. I want that. And that's what they put on their cover, because that's what's going to sell. It makes absolute perfect sense that, that is the mindset that they would do. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with stretch goals and being able to do it. I think what you're seeing now is really a generational thing. Is as the next generation of model railroaders, whomever they are, kind of start, we have very different obligations than I think some of the previous people did, and don't have the opportunities. I'm going to rephrase that. It's not that we don't have the opportunities. We have different opportunities than what previous generations has had. And I think the hobby is starting to reflect that. And that's really one of the great things about this hobby, is that it can be so adaptable, so that you can have just the same level of engagement and immersion that you do on these 300, 400, 500-foot main lines in basically about a 50-foot run, or even less than that, on a shelf that wraps around a corner. And that's a testament to this hobby.
Absolutely. Many, many points of entry into this hobby. So let's get back to just after college, James, and where you're heading with this as I cut you off.
Yeah, no. It's no problem. Post college, I am living in Des Moines. I am starting a nascent television career. And in the back of my mind, I'm still, I like railroading. I like models. I like this. I wish I had the space. I was living in an apartment. I was living, had very strict what I could and could not do in that space, and just started to kind of, well, let's just kind of keep going what we've been doing, keep reading. Eventually, one day will come. And it turns out that I didn't have to wait very long, because one day came in about 2002. I had left the job that I was at and took a different position at a competing station in the market, and was driving into the interview and didn't even realize that I went over a set of train tracks to get to the station. And it wasn't until about a week into my job at this new station that I'm sitting in my office, my cubicle that happened to be next to a window, and I hear the unmistakable sound of a diesel horn going off, and like a trained a hunting dog, you kind of snap your head one way and go, "Is that what I think that is? Why, yes, it is." And I look out my window, and I'm looking down Meredith Drive in Urbandale, Iowa, and I am seeing the Iowa Interstate's Grimes Industrial Track. And I'm seeing the Iowa Interstate Des Moines switcher working its way back from working Beisler Lumber in Urbandale to head all the way back downtown. And it was just one of those, well, that's kind of cool. That's right there. I don't have to go far to watch it. And so it became this, all right, I can rail fam from my window. And I can sit here and say, what is that? What are they doing? What's going? What time are they going by? How many cars are they going? Do you think I could come in early? If they're here now and my shift starts here, could I leave an hour early to catch them? Or do I have to come, could I adjust that? And so it became this on the way to work or back from work. Let's see what we can find. And so there was about a week and a half of just, urban geography, urban exploration to trace this line. And this is, long before any type of Google Maps, Google Earth, Google Street View, anything that you can kind of research from afar. You had to get out, and with a good pair of shoes and a camera and a notepad and kind of draw from there. And then you're pulling out the Rand McNally and say, okay, I think it crosses here, and trying to go from there. And then from that. And so I kind of by accident discovered the Iowa Interstate, and I had to know more. And luckily, this is the beginning of the Yahoo groups and mailing groups and stuff. And turns out that there was an Iowa Interstate Yahoo group, a mailing group. So I instantly sign up and put a post on it, because I'm nothing if not blatant and arrogant and have no problem to say, hey, I'm the new guy, help me out. And basically post, hi, my name is James, and I've moved to Des Moines. I lived here. I'm really interested in this line. Can somebody tell me more? And the first response was from Joe Atkinson. And that started a long friendship and a long personal and professional relationship in this hobby that continues to this day. And I am forever grateful to Joe, because his first response was, hey, another model railroader that's interested in the Iowa Interstate. Come here, because he was at the time the modeler of the Iowa Interstate. There is a reason we call him the Godfather, okay. and it's because without Joe Atkinson, none of this happens. Joe was the one that basically said, "Let me pull back the curtain and tell you everything that you need to know about this regional." And for weeks, months, I was pestering him nonstop. What about this? What about this? What about this? And he would just, here's what it is. Here's what it is. Here's what it is. And Joe has, is as knowledgeable about the Iowa Interstate as anybody can possibly be about a prototype railroad. It is impressive the amount of effort and energy that he has put towards just being a part of this railroad. The relationships that this man has with both the modeling community, but also with the actual Iowa Interstate itself, Joe should probably be employed by the Iowa Interstate just because of the effort that he has put into it. But when I was just literally starting, he was already on his way to being the preeminent Iowa Interstate modeler, and I'd argue still is.
It's pretty amazing. He took the right approach too, where there could have been a response that could have said, "Hey, I'm the Iowa Interstate guy. Go find another railroad," right? And it's just and he didn't, and he did the complete and total opposite, and that's so amazing. And I think most guys in the hobby do take that approach too, but it is tempting to say, hey, this is my territory. Get off my territory and go find something else. And he certainly didn't, and it took you right under the wing.
He had every right to say, "Go away, kid. You're bothering me." And I was a kid compared to him, and I had proven nothing, that I was not making any type of investment. I did not have the space, the time, the money, the energy, the ability to even remotely build something resembling the Iowa Interstate at that point in my life. He's already hand laying track. He's already been published. He's already doing all these things. I was the ultimate cousin Oliver. Just okay. If you just sit over there, and we'll be fine. But that's not what he did. And I cannot thank him. I thank him every time I see him. But I would not be sitting here with you, talking to your audience without Joe Atkinson's help. And
wow,
I can never repay him for that.
Right. What was the first look at? Let's talk about Joe Atkinson for a minute, because I got to interview him. So maybe I'll be able to do some pre-show notes while I'm sitting here.
I'm happy to do it.
What do you remember your first look at his layout and what your big takeaways were?
The first time I went over to his house, when it was what is now his old layout. He's obviously working on something new. I walked in. Joe used to have this wonderful old house with an equally old basement. And we were in the process of buying our house at the same time that is roughly the same vintage as of his. And I remember walking downstairs into his basement and for the first time and just going, this flows so perfectly. Joe did, and I believe, and still is, hand laying every single inch of his track on the layout. And because he was, more power to them. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, but when you saw it, because he was not constrained by commercial products, by commercial geometry, it just flowed together so smoothly. In my designs, in all the layouts that I have built, and this is the David Barrow influence that's coming back on me, my layouts have a tendency to be very diagrammic. They have a tendency to be very straight line, linear, parallel to the edge of the bench work. And, it's that's me. And I like it. There's nothing wrong with that. But my opinion is that this felt so natural and so smooth about moving it. And it was because he could basically build any turnout to any radius, to any geometry, to any frog angle that he needed. He was going to take the time. And I remember the first scene that I distinctly remember on his railroad. And this is probably about, we're coming up on 16 years, I think, since I was first time there, was the Council Bluffs, Iowa yard and engine house. And he modeled the Council Bluffs, Iowa is the western terminus of the Iowa Interstate. And so they have a yard there. So the old Rock Island yard at one point. Further to the west, it tees into with the Union Pacific and their pool yard for interchange and also, but it's the western terminus. And so they have a very old engine house left over from Rock Island days. And Joe was building it to exact replication of what it was. And I'm going, this is the first time I've seen something that wasn't basically out of a Walters catalog. Yeah. This is the first time that I'm seeing something that someone has basically a craftsman has built from here. And I'm going, well, okay, this is now my new benchmark, and how am I going to reach this level? And so that he yeah, I can go on for hours about Joe. His influence on me, David Barrow, Joe Atkinson. Those are my two biggest influences in this hobby.
So you're learning all this from Joe Atkinson about the Iowa Interstate, and you're doing all this, research the old-fashioned way. And I remember, researching lines here in Connecticut, by the same methods, ran McNally map, and I think it was SVP or somebody who came out with a railroad atlas that kind of got you in the neighborhood, and you can kind of figure out who was who, and figuring all that out. What was the kind of the next step for you to start putting this to model railroading application?
Once I realized that there was a railroad that did not require hundreds of locomotives, that did not require thousands of feet of track to try to replicate a viable portion of it, it was a matter of saying, okay, is there a portion of this railroad that I can accomplish kind of what I, at the time, think I want to accomplish, which is, to the best of my ability, a complete thought. I like beginnings and ends in stuff. So in the railroads that I build and the prototypes I'm looking for a situation where me or my crew members are basically starting at a place that they would normally start in real life, and then they're proceeding to a place that they would end in real life. So that requires, a beginning and an end. It requires a complete run idea. There's that Bill Darnaby, MRP 1995, because he talked about doing the entire division run and going from one point to another so a crew could step on and step off from there. And so I knew by this point I'm mature enough, or at least I think I'm mature enough, to realize that I'm never going to have a 600 foot run. So what is there available for me? And then I go back to, you've been driving over it every day. You've been driving over it every single day. Find out everything that you possibly can about the Grimes line. And what can you do to build that? And so that was the first real railroad that I built, was in the basement of the last duplex that I was renting before I got married and we bought our house. And it was my version of the Iowa Interstate's Grimes line, based on a design from David Barrow in Model Railroader Planning 1996. So I actually built dominoes and put it into a 12-foot by 12-foot G that basically said, okay, this is this part of the line, this is this part of the line, and we're going to run it. That was the first time that I had ever, and I do mean ever, built a layout that even remotely had all of the component parts that you would think should be in a layout. I don't get me wrong, it was rough. It was, because it's first attempts always are, but that 12-foot by 12-foot layout that was basically taken from an existing published plan and altered to match, and I'm using air quotes right now, I know you can't see this, but to somewhat replicate, if not permanently duplicate, what the Grimes line was in central Iowa. And because it had the beginning and the end, that helped reinforce what I think a model railroad should be and what I want from my model railroad.
I'm taking a look now at the plan. Special thanks to Joe Mammy, who, when I mentioned I was interviewing you, he said, "Oh, you got to ask him about this." And through he was able to come up with your track plan for the Grimes Industrial Track. And I was looking at it. And kind of a neat thing to me is you put a lot of industries on there that aren't rail served. It was you kind of incorporated that. That was just a neat thought, and kind of wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Again, it's you're trying to replicate what's there. And when the version of to clarify, I've done the Grimes line twice. The first version lasted about 2 years, and that was the one that was built in my duplex. And I had this grand plan that since I knew that I wasn't going to be there forever, I knew we were going to move at some point, that I was going to take these dominoes with me and rebuild it wherever we did. And because that's what dominoes are supposed to do. And then we got into our actual house, and it became real quick that okay, I can actually do something wildly different here and be a little bit more accurate to the Grimes line. So when we got into what is now our home, the same home that we live right now, I spent about 3 years of just sketching and planning ideas, because we were starting out in life. It wasn't going to be, hey, we bought the house, let's start building the railroads. Like, we got other things we got to deal with first.
Sure.
But when the Grimes line, when I started construction of the Grimes line, the one that appeared in Great Model Railroads 2015, that what I really realized at that point was that I really wanted to replicate the things that I saw on a regular basis. I can drive to this day down and follow the Grimes line, and it looks, I know where buildings are, and a majority of the things that are on that layout are not rail served, but they're part of the story. They're part of the environment. They're supporting characters in this story, and I got a lot of pushback is probably the strongest word that I would use. It was just, trolley comments, I guess, is, to be, if I'm being a little rude on that. Why are you building this thing? It's only got 2 customers, only got 3 customers. You've only got 10 turnouts. How beginner is your layout? And it's like, this ain't beginner. I'm doing my best to replicate, if not duplicate, what I see on a regular basis on the Grimes line. And that involves a lot of things that are just there, but have no role in the layout.
Well, they have a role because they exist, and it brings you to that, right? And I think that's what's really neat is that, I think somebody may look at this and say, what a temptation to just start making every building rail served and, okay, everybody gets a boxcar kind of thing. And you don't have to do that, but it's an accurate, more accurate representation of the Grimes industrial without, jamming it up with a whole ton of track.
Yeah. No, and I was posting on, you had the launch of Model Railroad Hobbyist about this time. I was very active on that forum for a period, and I'd put up, so here's what I'm doing, just basically to promote myself, because again, there's the arrogance kicking in at that point. But I would always get 1 or 2 people say, I would just fill that whole thing with track. It's like, but that's not what's there. That's not the Grimes line. That's not, at that point, I'm not doing the Grimes line. I'm doing something else. And I had basically bitten hook, line, and sinker into, this is what I want to replicate. And I'm willing to fact that it's only got X amount of this and X amount of that. And I could have built a spiral helix around our water heater and built a double-decker thing and had this, that, and the other thing, but it wouldn't have been the Grimes line at that point. It would have been some poor facsimile of anything at that point. Yeah. And as much as that first version, the version that kind of the people know, or at least kind of brought me to the hobby, or prominence in the hobby, that was the first time that I did it. That was a first for a lot of things for me. That was the first time that I used any type of real scenery product. That's the first time I used static grass. It's the first time I had ever modeled water, and that was on the expansion when I did it later. It was the first time that I had DCC sound. It was the first time that there's a lot of firsts for me, and it felt in many ways like grabbing lightning in a bottle. And I was like, I'm never going to be this fortunate again, because I still don't think of myself as, I'm still consider myself a very substandard modeler, at least from a scratch building and a freight car detailing design. I couldn't tell you the difference between a boxcar and what type of boxcar this is compared to that type of boxcar if I was standing there with the manual right in front of me. But it everything just kind of came together, and I was like, I this is amazing. I never thought I would have these opportunities.
Right. And by the way, I couldn't name a boxcar either. That's why I became friends with Tony Cook. I just said, he'll tell me all about it. So Sometimes you got to cheat to win, right? You got Joe Atkinson helping you. I got Tony Cook helping me. You got a good neighbor.
I got no problem. Yeah, I got no problems taking shortcuts whenever possible in this hobby to get to the end goal. So
right. So first version, second version of the Grimes Industrial. When does the Grimes Industrial stop wetting the whistle for you?
It didn't. It was taken from me. It was stolen from me. I had no choice. It had to go away. So was
this something with the mafia, or was this
no? If it were up to the mafia, like I said, if that were the case, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I'd be right. Wearing a pair of cement shoes. No. So we bought an old house because we wanted old, we wanted vintage, we wanted mature, we wanted an established neighborhood. And when you buy a house, my house is going to be 100 years old this year. And when you buy 100-year-old house, it comes with 100-year-old problems. And we knew that going in, but we were willing to put the time and energy in it to kind of make a house a home. And one of those problems was a cast iron sewer line that decided to collapse in February of 2018 that ran completely diagonal across our basement. And the collapse happened literally over Beiser Lumber, the peninsula that Beiser Lumber was on. Now, being an old house we didn't have a sump pump at that time. We just had, on the city sewer line, we would occasionally get water in the basement. It was never anything drastic. It was never anything that caused problems. We just considered it part of living where we lived in the house that we lived. We were not alone. Plenty of our neighbors had this problem whenever the rains would really crank up. This was just part of living here. And then on a February morning, I happened to go downstairs into the basement. I can't even remember why. And there was water in the basement. And I went, okay, here we go again. And then I realized, wait, that water smells funny. Why does that water smell and look funny? Oh, that's okay. This is bad. And it took us a while to realize that basically every time we were taking a shower, or anybody in the house taking a shower, the water was completely backing up into the basement. And what happened is that the cast iron, the main sewer line out to the house had collapsed. And so we had to bring in, the plumbers and people to kind of inspect it. They did the camera snake where they go down and came to the conclusion very quickly that liners were not going to help. This had to be replaced. And we talked about it and said, okay, well, we can do, this much. We can do 6 feet or so where we think the thing is, and it'll cost you this much. But for just a little bit more, we can do the whole thing. And I'm going, you better do the whole thing, because who knows what else is in this line. And Sure enough, when they actually did jackhammer out our sewer line, in addition to the main break, there was about 2 more further down the line. And this is a cast iron, this is not something that had happened at that point, 10 years that we had been living in the house. This had been going on long before we ever signed the mortgage to buy this house. So a lesson for everyone: get a good inspection when you buy a house. And I've learned my lesson from there
for sure.
And the gentleman that we hired to do the work, he walks down. I mean, he walked down to our basement first time and saw the layout. And went, hey, this is kind of cool. Are you going to be able to move it? No. and he said, well, we're going to start, on this day, and it would really help. We really need everything out to be able to do this. And I'm like, I understand. And I remember it was a Sunday morning that I started the process and I spent about 5 minutes going, how can I save this? How can I cut this up into sections and go put it somewhere else? In our garage, in our utility, in our spare bedroom, I don't care, the attic, so that I can try to rebuild this thing. And after about 5 minutes of it, I went, nope, it's all got to go. Yeah. And so in about 7 hours, I destroyed 8 years of progress on a railroad. Oh. And it was just one of those, you've got to be kidding me, as I'm taking part after part out of our basement, up the stairs, down the driveway to the Baxter, dumpster that I had ordered because I was like, I'm going to have to get this all in there, and then realized I'm going to need to get another one because it's going to fill up at least 2 to get this all out of here. And just was, I was not in a good mood for a long time. And it happened so fast and so quick. I just had no time to prepare, plan, give any kind of, formal eulogy. It was just, it's gone. And that's the end of it.
Was there anything when this collapse happened? Was there anything salvageable off the layout? I mean, were you able to at least recover some of it, or? Yeah, no. I mean, I was able to save all the electronic components. So, like the DCC system, I wasn't using switch motors at that time. Had a couple that still have them, the logic rail technologies, the grade crossing circuits, all that stuff got saved. Obviously, all the locomotives, all the rolling stock got saved, but that was it. That was it. I mean, I tried. There's one section that I was able to save. It is the Hickman Road overpass section of the rail, which I always considered kind of the signature scene of both that layout and also the prototype Grimes line. And it just happened to be in this perfect little section of foam that I could just pull the whole thing out, and it's about a 3-foot long chunk. And so I still have that section. It's actually sitting underneath the hills line on the shelves that are underneath my layout, roughly in the same position of where it was on the Grimes line layout. So it's kind of the reminder of the way things were, and one day maybe again. But we had to do so much in that basement to get that sewer kind of re-established. So we couldn't take showers until they fixed our sewer. And I wasn't going to be like, well, honey, we're going to have to smell today because, I don't want to have to put down more super trees this next month. It's like, no, it's coming out. And that experience obviously really, I think, became a major given and druther for the design of the Hills line and keeping the center of the room completely open, and keeping it just as we are not going to occupy any more space than we absolutely need to, because this room has to serve other purposes. And so help me, if we ever have a problem again, we're going to be able to fix it without destroying this railroad. I say that now. Get back to me in a couple of years. I'll let you know if that worked out or not. So, well, I'm sure the sewer is all PVC now, and hopefully a little more secure. That's a terrible way to go down and lose a layout. When did the recovery begin?
So the collapse happened in February. By May, we were basically done with all because we took the time to kind of waterproof and put in if we got to do this, let's make sure that we don't have these problems that we've had before. So we put in the French drain and the sump pump and the waterproof lining and the bracing and all the stuff that you do, the joys of living in the upper Midwest with a basement. And so it was about May when the basement was back to, we are clean, we are safe, we are dry, we are relatively warm down there. And then it became, okay, what now? What? And I actually had a lot. I think like a lot of model railroaders, I have I could maybe try this one day, and kind of a plan B, or maybe even wouldn't it be cool to do this and do something wildly different than what you're doing? And my plan B was actually to model the Norfolk Southern's Des Moines terminal. And a little known fact, the Norfolk Southern does serve Des Moines, Iowa. It is the most outlying region of the entire NS system. It is a legacy of the old Wabash Railroad that used to serve Des Moines back in the day. But there is actually a line that runs from St. Louis officially, but Moberly, Missouri, up through southeastern Iowa and cuts up and terminates in Des Moines. They actually bounce back and forth between Norfolk Southern trackage and BNSF trackage nowadays to make it to Des Moines, but it is a Norfolk Southern railroad. And that's even a cooler, the operation than I think the Grimes line, just because of the sheer diversity of industry that is served on that. And so there was I actually, during that 3-4 month period, started thinking, well, how could you do this? How could you do the Norfolk Southern? And what I had such strong beliefs and how a railroad should look and feel and be operated by this point, because of all my experience with the Grimes line, that the only way I was going to make the Norfolk Southern work in our basement was to switch to N scale. And that part kind of scared me. Not that there's a problem with N scale. It's just not something that I'm familiar with and with comfortable with. And by this point, I had spent, at least the last 8 years, specifically on the Grimes line, and then all the years prior to that, knowing and understanding the Iowa Interstate, saying, do you really want to hit the reset button? Do you really want to start completely over? I mean, because I felt like I was very comfortable, very knowledgeable about the operations, the procedures, the practices, the protocols of the Iowa Interstate, that I could make that work. But here was a brand new beast. And so I was going, oh, and then can you make it work in N scale where the primary activity is switching, not, just running trains, and talk to a lot of people about that. What do you think? Not what do you think I should do, but what would you do? And they were like, you're really going to have a problem with that. And I don't think I would know that I would go that way unless you could figure out the way to do it in HO scale. And I'm like, I just figure it out. And then a gentleman named Scott Sheffield, out of the blue, says, what about the Hills line? I'm sorry, the what? The Hills line. What's the Hills line? And the rest is history at that point. So it
kind of back to research again, back to where you were with the Grimes line. I got to learn a whole new line. And
it was a great, I knew, or even before the loss of the Grimes line, that I was never going to do it again, because of all the things that that had happened. That I am so grateful to this community of model railroads of hobbies for basically just saying, look at what this guy is doing, isn't it great? And I'm like, wow, that's never going to happen again. And anything, if I had tried to do the Grimes line again following that, in my mind, I was thinking, you'll never live up to what you did the first time. You will never be able to capture lightning in a bottle again twice. You've got to do something else. No matter what that is, you've got to do something else. You have done the Grimes line for King and Country. Move on. And there were a lot of people that when the word got out that we had the sewer collapse and this had happened, thought, well, we're looking forward to Grimes line 2.0. And I'm going, there's not going to be a 2.0. We've got.
There's got to be kind of a fear of, even for you, like comparing, well, the old one used to be, and now the new one isn't, or there's got to be something in that, even for yourself, like knowing that you used to have this, but now you don't. You have, that constant comparison to the old must have been a real bother to you.
Absolutely. I mean, there were issues with the original with the version of the Grimes line that everybody knows. There were mechanical issues. The electrical issues were cropping up by the dozen by the time that it had to come down. I was already sitting there trying to figure out, all right, how do I power all my frogs? How do I, on a scenic finished layout, how do I correct these issues without tearing things out? And so there were things that I could have improved on, but it was never going to be what it was. Yeah. And there was a big feeling of I've done this. It's time to try something a little bit different. And what I was able to find is that I didn't have to go very far. I could stay in my wheelhouse. I could stay in an area and a layout and a prototype and a scale and an era and even a general locale, even though I've obviously moved further east with the Hills line, that I was comfortable with, that I was knowledgeable about, that I knew that I could be successful by however you want to define a definition of success. But it was an opportunity to try different things. The Grimes line and the Hills line are very similar as far as traffic levels and kind of frequency of operations. Where they differ is in the traffic types and in the commodities they use. I always referred to the Grimes line as a suburban short line because it never got, other than even with Chicago Bridge and Iron, which was their water division, which basically built commercial water towers for buildings and companies and even cities to that point. That was probably the heaviest industry, but everything else, it kind of snaked through people's backyards and through the suburbs of Des Moines as it made its way out to Grimes. The Hills line cuts through Iowa City. The Hills line goes through a very industrial part of Iowa City to get down to Hills. And then when you're in Hills, you go to a single customer, Stutzman Ag Products, Eldon C. Stutzman Incorporated, that receives multiple car types, carrying multiple commodities to be spotted at multiple locations within this industry. It's just this one big, giant, massive industry. And so there was a lot of similarity, but there was it was basically two sides of the same coin. And you say, okay, what does this side look like for a while? And so there were a lot of things that I just say, okay, I understand this. It's comfortable, but I'm still going to be challenged and I'm still going to get to try something new and different. And so that was the ultimate appeal of the Hills line, was that it was the sequel. You know, you're still seeing kind of what made you love the first thing, but maybe you're kind of taking it into new directions and new territories with these characters.
Absolutely. I'm looking at the track plan now. So you mentioned, learning the lessons of, being able to keep your basement accessible for potential other maintenance requirements. I'm trying to go gently there. And then, But
let's not be gentle. It was horrible. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I don't want to drum up bad memories there. But so where does this? I see the stairs are kind of in the bottom left-hand corner. So is this like kind of half or a quarter of your basement kind of thing where it's?
Yeah. So ours is a classic American Foursquare, 24 feet by 24 feet. And so the basement is split in half. And the railroad side of it, basically was a storage room / rumpus room / whatever you wanted it to be in the 100 years of occupancy in the house. And then the opposite side of that, the other half, is the utility, the mechanical, the laundry room, all that stuff. So, I mean, to do and this was the case with the Grimes line. This is absolutely the case with the Hills line. To do laundry, you have to go through the railroad to get there. Yeah. If something happens with the water heater, you have to go through the railroad. If something happens with the furnace, you have to. We've replaced our furnace since this railroad was built, and it's been like, yeah, no problem. We can get in and out without any issues whatsoever. I have a workbench in that utility room there on the other side. Where I can do some light modeling. A lot of the stuff I do outside, just for not being spraying paint inside the house and all that other fun stuff. Right. But yeah, so that room has to have other functions. Our family has grown in between. When I built the Grimes line, it was just my wife and I. Our son has been born since then. So the Hills line is the first post-child layout that we've built, and I need that room to kind of serve as a secondary family room. For the house, just because we're growing. And so the fact that the railroad can coexist with these other needs without being without either, giving up these other needs, but also giving up the railroad, I'm very happy about that.
Tell us how you use are you seeing regular operating sessions on it now? Do you get the group together and...
The short answer is that both these layouts, definitely the Hills line and the Grimes line before it, don't lend themselves to regularly scheduled operating sessions. They are ad hoc. Every single one is ad hoc sessions. I am very much a lone wolf modeler, for lack of a better term. And so I don't have, the third Monday of the month at 7 p.m. operating sessions. I don't have that group. I have a group of people that if they're in town and they're around, hey, you interested in stopping by? Sure. Come on over. Let's talk. Let's catch up. Let's run the railroad for a little while. Obviously, the Grimes line, excuse me, I'm going to even I get them confused after all these years. The Hills line kind of came into availability, where it started running right as COVID was cranking up. And so that really kind of limited the ability to say, hey, come on over and see what I've built to replace, the Grimes line. But now that the world is getting back to normal, as whatever we want to define normal, you're starting to get, hey, we're passing through. Hey, do you mind if I see it? Do you mind there? I don't like, just open the door and say, "Hey, sure, come on in." It's like, I'm despite my outgoing, arrogance here, I am pretty shy and reserved in some cases. So I kind of who are you? I'm gonna get to know you and things before I kind of let you in my house. But with the Mafia and with a couple of other people, you're passing through, I'll do my best to accommodate you if I'm around. One of the big challenges I have is my modeling season is different than everybody else's. I've come to determine. I've come to the experience that basically everybody does their railroads in the winter because they can't go anywhere. They're stuck inside. Might as well work in the basement. In the winter is when I work because I'm a freelance producer, director, replay operator for ABC, NBC, CBS, ESPN, whoever has been named. And so falls and winters, that's football and basketball season. And so I'm doing that. And then I get done with that and we kind of switch to baseball. And since there's not baseball in this area, and I may occasionally go do a Royals or a Twins game every so often, but the summer is considerably a lighter schedule from that standpoint than it is compared to everything else. That's when I work on my railroad. And that's when everybody's like, playing golf or doing outside activities and everything. So I'm actually completely 180 flipped. And so it's just, hey, we're going to be around in November. I'm out of town because I'm doing something else. So, Right. So it's, and so because of all of that, I've never done the scheduled thing. It's always been, if I'm available and you're available, come on over. Where the advantage is that the railroad can literally be ready to go at the flip of a switch. Yeah. And this is the advantage of a smaller, single train, no more than maybe 6 cars in a given train. We can restage at a drop of a hat. We can absolutely be reset and ready to go by literally clicking a button and being ready to go. So if you're coming over and you wanna run 4 or 5 times, no problem. Chunk, and we can just keep going. And it's none of those, hey, I got a visitor coming over, but I can't run the railroad because it's not an operating session, and so it'll screw up the pattern for the other 6 trains. We can just do it whenever we want to. And that's the ultimate advantage to me of modeling these smaller railroads.
Yeah, I find that for me, I have a layout that does operate on a once a month schedule, but I also have a switcher and a mill that gives it that instant on. So I can appreciate that instant on feeling for it, where you can move some cars and you don't mess anything up. Or for you, it's nice to be able to go down and kind of scratch the itch for 15, 20, 25 minutes and just run something short. Well, if you got a breather or a moment, or I work from home, so I can drop down there and just take my mind off of work for a few minutes and just switch a couple cars.
And there have been countless times that I have started a train, to say, okay, I know that the work for this train is here, and we're done. And I'll say, all right, you know what? I'm just going to run for 15 minutes, stop, 2-3 days later. All right, let's do this. All right, I'm done. Stop. 2-3 days later, come back. Okay, I'll run okay, now we're finally done, and so an op session, as it were, stretching over 4 or 5 days.
Sure.
And that's thoroughly enjoyable for me.
Yeah, a layout built for you, the things that you wanted. You found your why, which we talk about quite a bit on the show, and Lance Minheim has helped drive that point home. But you find your why, right? And you've done that, and with 2 different layouts. Phenomenal work. We didn't even get a chance to really dive in too deep into some of this, but we're going to provide some links. Why don't you tell everybody where you can find more information on your layout?
As always, the latest and most recent updates on the railroad are available online at thehillsline.com. That's where I keep the blog updated about what we're doing. On that website, you can also find links to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Flickr, variety of other social media things. It is so easy to self-publish and get content out there nowadays that my logic is I want to meet you where you are. And if you want to meet me on this platform or this platform or this platform, fine, I'll be there. We will give equal or try to give equal precedent to all of them. As we're recording this, I actually just did my first live session on YouTube within the past week, and had an absolute blast doing that, and just kind of taking people around saying, here's where we are right now. Here's the state of the railroad as we speak, and got some great feedback from that.
I encourage everybody to check that out. We'll provide all those links in the show notes. We'll also provide those links on our Facebook page. When the episode comes out, you'll see those. So be able to check out James and the beautiful work he's done with the Hills Line. And we're going to get James back here anyway, and we're going to talk about that. Well, I'm sure Joe Atkinson will probably tell some stories that James will have to rebut. So we'll be handling the Iowa Interstate Mafia for some time. So James, thank you for coming on Around the Layout.
Ray, thank you. Pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.